Tension is running high. Ryan and his team are preparing for a dangerous operation to save their daughter and grandson. They face a difficult task: to penetrate a well-guarded area and confront armed criminals. Will Ryan be able to fulfill his mission? Will he be able to save his family? And what sacrifices will he have to make? Don't miss this episode, full of action and drama. And to not miss the next parts, just click the subscribe button, and YouTube will recommend you new parts of this wonderful story. The most important thing is hope. Chapter 6. Thank you, Ryan, she said. I appreciate you trusting me enough to tell me the whole truth. I understand why you held back before. I probably would have done the same thing. Truth be told, I've suspected something like this before. Really? He asked. Yeah, she said. You may be dressed like a hick, but it's obvious you're not just a dumb redneck. I see the way you act, the way you handle yourself, and the way you take everything in, almost like you're planning some kind of defense, like you're expecting an attack. I've seen you sometimes look off into the distance as if you were 1,000 miles away, and I've heard you scream in your sleep. He stared at her, shocked. By the way, who is Dawson? I heard you call out to him, saying something like, Dawson, no, what does that mean? He was my comrade, Ryan said. We were in Africa. A grenade was thrown into our camp. The rest of us scattered for cover, but not Dawson. He lunged at the grenade just as it exploded. He saved us all. But he didn't make it, did he? Asked Beverly. Ryan shook his head, remembering that night. No, he said, a tear rolling down his cheek. We were surrounded and couldn't get him out of there. We used him to cover the others. He had a wife and 3 kids. I was the one who had to tell her he wasn't coming back. Oh my God, she said. That must have been awful. I've been living with guilt about it ever since, he said quietly. I keep thinking it should have been me in his place. He had a family to live for, and I had nothing. She walked over to him and hugged him as he cried bitter tears. It's all right, she said. It's all in the past. It's all over. I'm here now, with you. But I'm curious. Why tell me all this now? Because I've fallen in love with you, Beverly, he said. I don't want there to be any secrets between us. You know what, cowboy? She asked. I'm falling in love with you too. I'm your partner in all this, remember? He nodded his head. And where you go, I go. That's just the way it is. You hear me, soldier? He smiled, nodding his head. I can hear you, he said, loud and clear. Okay, she said. So, what do you plan to do with this retreat? Are you thinking about going after it? I don't know, he said. I'm tempted. I still have a lot of work to do. Just don't do anything stupid, she said. I just found you, and I don't think I could stand losing you too. He smiled. No problem, he said. A week later, he received the call he feared. He was just finishing dinner at Beverly's house when the phone rang. Ryan, said Bob when he called out. Ryan realized that Bob was upset. What's going on, son? Asked Ryan. They took Sarah and little Ryan, Bob said hysterically. Who took them? Asked Ryan. Elmer's boys, Bob said. I came home from work and 2 FBI agents were already unconscious in our living room, and Sarah and Ryan were gone. They left a note asking me to call off the authorities, or Sarah would be the center of their next sortie. I've called the FBI, but I don't know if they're doing anything. They won't tell me anything. All right, son, Ryan said. I'll take it from here. What happened? Asked Beverly when Ryan finished talking. They took Sarah and little Ryan, Ryan said. Oh my God, Beverly said. Look, I need to get home. Make some calls, Ryan said. Do what you normally do. Don't say anything to anyone. Okay, honey, she said. I have a few things to do. I'll come over when I'm done. We'll get through this. Don't worry. Okay, Ryan said. He kissed Beverly and headed home. When he got home, he called Bill. Hey, how's it going? Asked Bill. Too bad. They took Sarah and little Ryan, Ryan said. Oh shit, Bill said. Any idea where they're headed? Yeah, Ryan said. I haven't checked, but I've got a pretty good idea. Listen, I need you to contact the old team and get them here as fast as you can. Got it? Understood, old friend. Bill said. I'll be in touch. They finished talking, and Ryan dialed Jorge's number. Good evening, Jorge said. What's the word? I just heard from Bob. Elmer's guys grabbed Sarah and little Ryan, Ryan said. They also took the lives of the 2 FBI guys protecting them. Damn it, Jorge said. I think so too, Ryan said. I've been in touch with Bill. He's making some calls. I want you to get in touch with both Bob and Bill. I'd like you to be on the team if possible. Do you think they're going on a retreat? Asked Jorge. Yeah, Ryan said. Okay, I'll contact them and get back to you, he said. I have something that might come in handy. They finished talking, and Ryan went to his home office, where a map of the retreat was drawn on a whiteboard. He studied the map and began making plans. A few minutes later, Beverly walked through the front door and stood next to Ryan. What are you planning? She asked. I need to take a look at this camp, he said. What? She asked. Are you going there tonight? Alone? I need to know if our information is correct, and I need to know if they took Sarah and Ryan there, Ryan said. I can't do that from here. It's only 2.5 hours by car. I can cross Highway 62 here, take this road into New Mexico, and end up north of their camp. If everything is right, I can end up right here, he said, pointing to a spot on the map, and I can look into their hideout without them realizing anything. What if one of the neighbors spots you? She asked. Judging from the satellite photos I took from the internet, no one lives within a 10-mile radius of this place, so I don't think it's going to be a problem, he said. Why don't you just call the FBI and let them handle it? She asked. Right, Ryan said. Because the FBI did such an amazing job protecting my family. Look, Bev, these people are dangerous and they don't play by the rules. They may expect the FBI, but they don't expect me. Besides, they have my family, and I made Elmer Jenkins a promise. This has to end now. Do you have to do this? She asked. Yes, honey, he said. That's my family. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to do some recon. 2.5 hours there, maybe a half hour or so on the ground, then 2.5 hours back. It's 8 o'clock. If you don't hear from me by 11:30 or so, call this number. He held out Agent Smith's business card to her. Tell him where I am. He'll take it from there. Okay, she said. He held out a .45 caliber pistol to her. Hold on to that, he said. If anyone but me comes through that door, you know what to do. Aim for the center and shoot. Okay, she said nervously. He led her to a closet in the hallway, opened the door, and pulled a hidden rope. The floor swung open, revealing a staircase. Then you come in here, close the door behind you, and get the hell out. The pistol range opens from here, he said. Understood? She nodded her head. I get it, she said. Okay, he said. I just need to grab a few things and I'll be off. He went back to his office and picked up the backpack he had packed earlier. Beverly went to the kitchen and returned with a thermos full of fresh, hot coffee. He smiled as she handed him the thermos. Remember that I love you, she said, kissing him. I love you too, he said, returning her kiss. Don't worry, it's just reconnaissance. I'll call you when I get back. Don't call me. If Bill, Bob, or Jorge calls, tell them to text me. I'll call them back. What if the people who took your daughter call? What do I tell them? She asked. Tell them I'm having a beer or something, he said. Take a message, text me, and I'll call them back. Okay, she said. They kissed again, and Ryan headed outside. She watched the truck pull into the driveway, and tears stood in her eyes. Please, God, she pleaded, save my man and bring him back to me. Ryan filled both of his truck's fuel tanks in town, as well as 2 5-gallon jerry cans he kept just in case. He knew there was a station where the road crossed the highway and planned to fill the tanks there, but he didn't want to take any chances. He drove through town and made it to the highway, where he filled the tanks and refilled the thermos. Now it was on to New Mexico. He followed the road closely and finally reached his destination. He put the truck in 4-wheel drive and drove down the dirt road for about 100 yards before stopping. He grabbed his backpack and applied camouflage paint to his face. Taking his night vision binoculars, He cautiously made his way toward the rocks overlooking the campground. Putting the binoculars to his head, he looked closer and found a Learjet parked at one end of the dirt airstrip, indicating that the board along with Sarah and little Ryan were already here. He looked around the camp itself and noticed that it was surrounded by a high chain-link fence. Probably electric, he said to himself, looking at what looked like signs attached here and there to the fence. He suspected that the place was surrounded by sensors to detect possible intruders. There was a single gate here, with 2 guards on duty and 12 other guards walking the grounds. There could be more, he thought. They might already be inside one of the log buildings. He studied their movements and made notes in his notebook. As he watched, he saw a woman and boy being led into one of the buildings by an armed guard and a larger man who looked like Elmer. It was undoubtedly Sarah and Ryan. He marked the building on his notepad. He noticed a few more unarmed people wandering carelessly between the buildings. They seemed to be slightly drunk, and he could hear their laughter and jokes, though he couldn't make out what they were saying. Perhaps they were other members of the council who had come for the festivities. He took notes on the topography and general layout of the area, and then slowly headed back to the truck. Looking at his watch, he realized he had been there for a little over 30 minutes. He put away all his belongings and wiped the camouflage paint off his face. He connected his smartphone to Bluetooth so he could use it hands-free and drove out onto the road without turning off his headlights. Once on the road, he turned and ran without turning off his headlights for at least a mile. Fortunately, there was enough moonlight for him to see the road well. When he was sure everything was all right, he called Beverly. "Are you okay?" she asked as soon as she picked up the phone. "I'm fine," he said. "I'm on my way back." "So you got what you needed?" she asked. "Oh yeah," he said. "No problem. Any news on your end?" "Yes, Jorge called me. He told me to tell you that they're on their way, and you can call him on his cell phone when it's safe," she said. Them, Ryan wondered. Who the hell was they? He dialed Jorge's number. Bob picked up the phone. "Hey, Ryan," he said. "Hey," Ryan said. "What's going on?" "Jorge, Bill and I are on our way to your place," Bob said. "What?" asked Ryan. "All 3 of you?" "Yes," Bob said. "Look, son, this isn't a camping trip, you know that," Ryan said. "I know, Ryan," Bob said, "but they have my family, and I'm not going to just sit around and wait for someone else." Ryan understood how Bob was feeling right now, so he decided not to argue, at least over the phone. "We'll talk about it later," Ryan said. "Let me talk to Bill." He heard the phone change hands. "Yes, boss," Bill said. "Did you get in touch with the old team?" asked Ryan. "Yeah, at least some of them," Bill said. "I talked to Ian, Buster, Cap, and Jim. They're on their way over right now. Should be there around noon or so." "Okay," Ryan said. "When do you think you'll be there?" "From the way Jorge is driving, I'd say it's about 5 p.m., Bob said. Damn, Ryan thought. Jorge must be racing like a bat out of hell. "Okay, see you later then," Ryan said. "Be careful." He ended the conversation and continued driving. Stopping in front of the house, he grabbed his things and went inside where Beverly was waiting for him. She rushed over to him and put her arms around his neck. "Thank God you made it home," she said. "I was so worried about you." He hugged her back and kissed her. "Nothing to worry about," he said. "It was just reconnaissance." "They're on retreat like you thought?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "They've got Sarah and little Ryan in there." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Friends are on their way," he said. "I intend to go after them." "What?" she asked, shocked. "Are you crazy?" "I guess," he said. "I warned Elmer Jenkins about what would happen if he messed around with my family. You might want to stay here tonight, just to be safe." "All right," she said quietly. "But I have to tend to the chickens in the morning." "I'll go with you," he said. "Just in case. Do you have any deliveries for tomorrow morning?" "I have a few, but they're around," she said. "Maybe I'd better come with you," he said. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," she said. "I don't think they'll come after me, but I'll take my shotgun with me, just in case." Take your phone too, he said. Keep your eyes open. If you notice anything unusual, call me immediately. I will, I promise, she said. They slept for a few hours and then got up again. While Ryan showered and dressed, Beverly made breakfast. After eating, they went back to her house and busied themselves with the chickens. Beverly gathered the eggs she had to deliver and the .410 shotgun. Could you do me a favor? He asked, pulling a $100 bill out of his pocket. Of course, she said. Could you stop by Jerry's store on your way back and pick up a couple of 12-pound packs and about 10 cigars? He asked. Jerry's had a small country store that catered to the people of the area. Are we having a party? She asked. He smiled and shook his head. No, he said. It's kind of a tradition. Good, she said. Thank you. And remember, call me if you see anything unusual, he told her. I will, I promise, she said. I'll let you know when I'm done and come back. They kissed, and he watched her leave. He went back to his room and began studying the map. After a while, the phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw that it was an unknown number. He wondered if he should send it to voicemail, but decided against it. Hi, he said in reply. Ah, Mr. Caldwell, said a voice in which Ryan recognized Elmer Jenkins. Just the man I'm looking for. What do you want, Jenkins? Asked Ryan. I want you to get the feds off my ass, he said. I don't run the FBI, Ryan said. And anyway, why would I want to? Because I happen to have your daughter and grandson, that's why, Elmer said. I don't believe you, Ryan said, even though he knew otherwise. Let me talk to them. Okay, Elmer said. Ryan heard movement. Then Sarah picked up the phone. Daddy? She asked. Are you okay? Asked Ryan. What about little Ryan? I'm fine, but they drugged Ryan with some stuff, and he's asleep right now, she said. Hang in there, princess, he said. I'll get you home soon. Not so fast, Elmer said. You have 24 hours to get the feds off my back, or your beautiful princess will come back to you in the mail. Do you remember what I told you, Jenkins? Asked Ryan. Elmer laughed. What are you going to do? He asked. You're an old, haggard, one-eyed merc. You'd best present the case to your FBI buddies, and you'd better do it fast. Just so you know, Jenkins, Ryan said. I always keep my promises. I hope pain is something you enjoy, because I'm coming for you. You and what army? Said Elmer, laughing. 24 hours, old man. Do it. Ryan started to say something, but Elmer was already done talking. He looked at his watch and saw that it was almost 11 o'clock. He remembered that Bill had said the rest of the crew would be in around noon, so he headed upstairs. He pulled a trunk out of the closet and opened it. He hadn't used any of these things in about 4 years, and wasn't sure if the old uniforms would even fit him. He pulled out a set of folded desert camouflage and a pair of worn combat boots. Undressing, he put on a black t-shirt and camouflage pants. Taking off his cowboy boots, he put on his combat boots and laced them up, then put his pants on over the boots. He was surprised that the old pants still fit. He grabbed his belt and other things, then pulled an old desert camo hat and jacket out of the trunk. He slammed the lid shut and went downstairs. He tossed the jacket and hat on a chair in his downstairs office and examined his gear. A few minutes later, the phone rang. He looked and saw that it was Beverly calling. Hey, he said in response. Everything okay? It's okay, she said. I hope Coors is all right, because that's what I have, and I have your cigars, so I'm going back. Thank you for letting me know about this, he said, and I really appreciate you getting these things. I'll see you when you get home. My pleasure, she said. Love you. I love you too, he said, ending the conversation. A few minutes later, she pulled up, and he got out to help her get everything into the house. She was shocked when she saw him in camouflage. Are you going off to war or something? She asked. Something, he said, as he helped her get everything into the house. I made Elmer a promise, and I intend to keep it. What was that promise? She asked. I promised him a war he couldn't believe if he messed around with my family, Ryan said. And that's exactly what I'm going to give him. What if you hurt yourself? She asked. Then I get injured, he said. It happens. No, she said. I'm not going to let that happen. I can't lose you too. Not like this. He has my daughter and my grandson, Ryan said. Besides, I won't be alone. My team is on the way. You mean the other mercenaries you used to work with, right? She asked. Some of them are, he said. At that moment, they heard the distinctive sound of a helicopter flying over the house. Looking outside, Ryan saw a Vietnam-era olive-drab vintage Huey land on the pad he usually used as a shooting range. I'll be damned, he said, laughing. What is it? Asked Beverly fearfully. Is Elmer following us or something else? No, he said. It's the cavalry. Couldn't you make some kind of lunch? The boys will be a little hungry, I think. Sure, she said. I can make some egg salad sandwiches if you don't mind. Sounds beautiful, he said, kissing her. I'll be right back. He took his camouflage hat and walked out to meet his old comrades, who were already getting out of the old helicopter. Jim, old dog, Ryan said, as he approached the man flying the helicopter. How's it going? Where'd you get that? I've been working on it for the last 3 years or so, Jim said. What do you think? I'm impressed, Ryan said. Does this thing have any bite? It happens, Jim said, as he walked around the front of the ship. Ryan noticed the black emblem on the front panel, a raised fist with an extended middle finger. Ryan laughed. Nice touch, Ryan said, pointing to the emblem. Jim laughed. Fits my mood most of the time, he said. Check this out, he said, opening the side door. He pulled back the tarp to reveal an M134 minigun. Think this will fit? Asked Jim. I think so, Ryan said. The M134 is a 6-barrel rotary machine gun capable of firing 2,000 to 6,000 rounds of 7.62 mm NATO ammunition per minute. Jim had a rig that allowed him to fire the machine gun through a side door. I wanted to buy some rockets, but they just weren't in the budget, Jim says. So you put this thing together yourself? Asked Ryan. Quite a lot, Jim said. It took me a while to get all the parts together. I had to redo a few things, and the engine took some work, but all in all, it's as good as new. How much will it cost? Asked Ryan. Jim shook his head. Just pay for my fuel, give me a beer or two, and we'll get it over with, Jim said. I mean, we're comrades. You've saved my ass more than once, so I owe you one. Ryan nodded his head and shook Jim's hand. Thanks, old friend, Ryan said. The 4 men took their gear and Ryan led them back to the house. Guys, this is my girlfriend, Beverly Simons, Ryan said as they entered the kitchen. Beverly, this is Jim Talbot, Ian White, former SAS officer, Charles Torres, we call him Buster, and Mark Hammond. We just call him Cap. It's short for Blasting Cap because he's so good with explosives. Girlfriend? Asked Cap. I thought you were done with women. Was until I met Beverly, Ryan said. He took a quick look around the room and let them go to put their things away and go to the bathroom. So I'm your girlfriend now? Asked Beverly quietly as he returned to the kitchen. Yeah, you could say that, Ryan said, noticing the smile on her face. Do you have a problem with that? She smiled, shaking her head. Not at all, sir, she said, and kissed him. Not at all. Buster growled good-naturedly as he entered the kitchen, and everyone laughed. Beverly finished making the sandwiches and set them on the kitchen counter, then poured everyone a glass of sweet tea. I hope you like egg salad and sweet tea, she said. I love egg salad, ma'am, Cap said, taking a bite out of his sandwich. Thanks. You're welcome, she said. Ryan, you better stick with that woman, Cap said. Someone who can make egg salad this good is a keeper. I'm going to, Ryan said. They spent the next half hour or so eating their sandwiches and exchanging phrases. When they finished eating, Ryan spoke again. Bill won't be here for a while yet, so I can bring you up to speed, he said. When Bill gets here, we'll discuss the plan. He spent the next hour or so telling everyone what had happened since the day Bob had come into his life. Damn it, Ian said when Ryan was done. I agree, Ryan told him. You screwed up leaving Jake alive. You know that, don't you? Asked Buster. Maybe, Ryan said. I was actually thinking of ending the bastard, but then I changed my mind. If I did, I'd probably end up in jail. You're right, Cap said. And there would be 2 witnesses to that. How did you manage to do that with one eye? asked Ian. It wasn't easy, but I practiced, Ryan said. So you can work in the field? Asked Ian. I can handle it, Ryan said. They heard a car stop in front of the house. Looking closer, Ryan saw that it was a dark SUV. He noticed Agent Smith getting out of the car. Hide your weapons, he said. I'll take care of it. He was out the door and standing on the porch when Agent Smith approached him. So, did you hear what happened? Asked Ryan. Yes, Agent Smith said. I figured you were putting something together. So you decided to try and stop me, huh? Asked Ryan. I did it your way, and look where that got me. You don't understand, Ryan, Smith said. You don't mind if I call you Ryan, do you? Not at all, Ryan said. Roger Gillespie, one of the agents who guarded your daughter, was a good friend of mine, Smith said. He was the best man at my wedding and I was his best man. His little boy is my godson. So, what does the Bureau do? Asked Ryan. Not a damn thing, Smith said. It's all politics. They're all trying to get their thumbs out of their asses, hoping they can save face in front of the politicians in Washington. Night petroleum is very influential in certain circles. There's even talk that the president might announce a pardon if someone is convicted. So, what do you want from me? Asked Ryan. I want to join you, Smith said. I realized you were planning something, and I want to help. I'm not going to arrest anybody, Ryan said. I don't believe in taking prisoners. You understand that, don't you? That's what I figured, Smith said. But can you live with that? Asked Ryan. This isn't my first rodeo, you know, Smith said. Prior to working for the Bureau, I served in a SEAL unit. So to answer your question, yes, I can relate to that. Not so good with that badge, Ryan said. I'm not an agent right now, Smith said. Like you, I want justice. Ryan stared at him for a while before answering. Perhaps Smith was just trying to sneak in so he could arrest them all later. But the look on Smith's face and the fire in his eyes told a different story. Okay, Ryan said. Welcome to the party, he added, extending his hand. Smith took his hand, and they shook it. At that moment, a dark van drove down the driveway and stopped in front of his house. Ryan looked at his watch, 5 o'clock in the evening period. As he watched, Bob, Jorge, and Bill got out of the car and headed to the porch where Ryan made introductions. Ryan, I want to go with you, Bob said. I know I haven't seen many fights like you, but I want to do my part. After all, this is my family. Do you have any military training, son? Asked Ryan. I was in the Army Reserves for 4 years, he said. My unit was deployed to Iraq for about 8 months. Reservist, Ryan said. What were you doing in Iraq? I spent some time as a door gunner on a helicopter, Bob said. I don't know if that would help you. A door gunner? Asked Ryan. You ever run an M134 minigun? Bob chuckled. Yeah, Bob said. Just don't tell me you actually have one. Ryan smiled. Today's your lucky day, son, he said. Not only do we have an M134, but we have a Huey to transport it. No shit? Asked Bob. Holy shit, son, Ryan said. Let's go inside. We have some planning to do. Ryan invited them into the house and closed the door behind him once everyone was inside. After introductions, Ryan sat everyone down at the table and had Beverly pass out beers. After everyone had a glass of beer, he stepped forward. We've got some planning to do, guys, he said. But first, we have a little tradition. Ian, will you do the honors? Ian stood up and raised his beer glass. To Dawson and all the other guys who never came home, he said. Everyone raised their beers. Dawson, the veteran mercenaries, repeated and took a long sip of beer each. Beverly, Bob, and Smith joined them. When they finished, Smith raised his beer. To my friend Roger Gillespie, who gave his life protecting Sarah and her son, he said. Everyone raised their beer glasses. To Gillespie, they all said, taking another long sip each. We usually break bottles on the floor, Ryan says. But since this is a fairly new carpet, we're going to have to drop that part of the tradition. Everyone laughed. The plan has changed a bit. Jim, meet the new shooter, he said, putting his hand on Bob's shoulder. Have you ever fired a minigun? Said Jim. Bob nodded his head. Yes, in Iraq, he said. Okay then. When we're done, join me and we'll edit everything for you, okay? Asked Jim. Yeah, Bob said. Beverly walked over to Ryan and took his hand. I want to come too, she said. Everyone stopped their classes and stared at her in shock. Honey, this isn't a walk, Ryan said. You could get seriously hurt. But we're partners, she said. Where you go, I go, remember? Ryan's right, Beverly, Smith said. Besides, what would you do? Actually, I could use her help on the switchboard, Bill said. Have you seen what's in there? Jorge has so many damn monitors and stuff, there's no way I can keep track of it all by myself. Ryan thought for a few moments. Bill was a good man, but his prosthetic leg prevented him from getting around in the field, and having someone with him to keep an eye on the monitors would free up Jorge. He looked at Bill. You'll be training her and providing protection, right? He asked. Absolutely, boss, Bill said. Ryan nodded his head. Okay, after we plan the operation, you'll send her there and start training her, Ryan said. Will do, boss, Bill said. Ryan looked at Beverly. Promise me you'll be careful, he said. I will, Ryan, she said. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you or upset you. He hugged her and smiled into her face. I'm not embarrassed or upset, he said. I couldn't be more proud of you right now. Besides, we'll have a lot to tell our grandchildren. She smiled back at him. Really? She asked. Are you serious? Of course, he said. Now, let's go over the plan. They all went to Ryan's office where he had a map and diagram of the camp. They spent the next 2 hours working out a plan of operation. When they had worked out a plan of attack, Bill handed out a GoPro camera to each of them that attached to their body armor and a communication device with an earpiece on the end of a spiral wire. Each device had a number printed on it. Ryan's was number 1. All right, Bill said. The call sign, as always, is Whiskey Delta. Ryan, of course, is Whiskey Delta 1. Everyone else's numbers are on their communicators. We'll be monitoring your actions at the CP. That's Command Center for those unfamiliar with the term, he added, looking at Beverly. What does Whiskey Delta stand for? She asked. Dogs of War, Jim said. It's from the old phrase, call out the chaos and unleash the dogs of war. It's Shakespeare, you know. So Ryan is the number 1 fighting dog? She asked innocently. Everyone else giggled. She looked around, not sure what was so funny. Something like that, Buster said. Okay, Ryan said. We'll take off at 23 o'clock or 11 o'clock. That way we'll be at the target at 1:30. It's still light enough to get everything set up, so let's go. Bill and Jorge handed out a set of night vision goggles to each. Bob went with Jim to the helicopter to set up the minigun, and Bill took Beverly to the controls to begin her training. At that moment, a sheriff's patrol car pulled up in front of the house. Oh shit, Ryan said quietly as he watched Sheriff Coltrane get out of the car. Ryan looked at Agent Smith. I need you to help me deal with this, he said. Smith nodded his head and made a formal face. Sheriff Coltrane, Ryan said with a smile on his face. What can I do for you, sir? I was driving by and saw all this activity and a helicopter in the backyard, and I got curious, the sheriff said. Are you having some kind of party here or something? Agent Smith pulled out his ID and showed it to the sheriff. Special Agent Smith, FBI, he said, introducing himself. Are you Sheriff Coltrane? Actually, yes, the sheriff said, pouting. I've heard good things about you, Sheriff, Smith said. I'm happy to do the FBI any favor I can whenever possible, the sheriff said. Good, Smith said with a smile. I'm glad to hear that. Look, Mr. Caldwell is helping us with a special operation, and I'd consider it a personal favor if you'd help us out. What can I do? The sheriff asked. We'll be leaving here about 11 o'clock, and I'd appreciate it if you'd clear a road for us, say, from here to the state line. Can you do that, Sheriff? He asked. Sure I can, Sheriff Coltrane said. Is this one of the Black Ops? Something like that. The most covert operation imaginable, Sheriff, Smith said. Lives are on the line here, so I'd appreciate it if you didn't say anything about this to anyone. I mean nothing. In fact, it would be best if you just forget we were even here. Consider it done, Agent Smith, he said. How secret is it? It's so secret that only a very few people know about it, Smith said. So I'm counting on you to help us keep it secret. Truth be told, I probably violated federal law just by telling you this was going to happen. You realize that if this gets out, it would be treason, and you know what the penalty for that is. Coltrane pondered Smith's words. You have my word of honor, Agent Smith, he said. No one will ever find out about this from me. Thank you, Sheriff, Ryan said. We'll let you know when we're ready to go. Ryan and Smith returned to the house and went into the study. You know, I'm probably going to hell for this, Smith said. Ryan chuckled. I don't think so, Ryan said. At least not without a good fight. Ryan put on his gear and pulled out a combat knife. It was the biggest knife Smith had ever seen. Ryan took a piece of paper and deftly cut it in two. Damn, Smith said. Now that's a knife. Is that your service pistol? Asked Ryan, pointing to the gun in Smith's shoulder holster. Yes, that's right. Why? Asked Smith. Leave it, Ryan said, walking over to the open gun cabinet in the study. Along with all the ammo. But what am I going to use? Asked Smith. Ryan handed him an old M1911.45 caliber pistol and several fully loaded magazines in holsters. This, Ryan said. Where did you get that from? Asked Smith. You don't want to know, Ryan said. Last I heard, it was imported from Mexico. Smith examined the gun and noticed that the serial number was scuffed. He checked the mechanism and examined the magazines. Mexico, huh? Asked Ryan. That's what I heard, Ryan said. I think it was one of the guns featured in the Fast and Furious scandal, but I'm not 100% sure. Uh-huh, Smith said, tucking his gun into his shoulder holster. Ryan tossed Smith a can of camouflage paint. Smith caught it and put it in his jacket pocket. Put them on when we get to the state line, Ryan said. I hope you have gloves? Gloves? Asked Smith. Why? Fingerprints, Ryan said. Just in case, I don't want to leave anything that could lead back to us. Good idea, Smith said. Yeah, I've got a pair of gloves. Keep these, Ryan said. Use these, he added, holding out a pair of black gloves to him. I don't want a GSR on your gloves if we can help it. What about my jacket? Asked Smith. Keep that one too, Ryan said. Use one of mine if you need to. We're about the same size. Smith rummaged through Ryan's closet and found a dark green lightweight jacket. He put it on, and Ryan tossed him a camouflage hat and a Kevlar vest. Smith put it on, and Ryan looked him over. He nodded his head when everything was ready. You'll do fine, Ryan said. Well, thank you, Smith said sarcastically. Ryan smiled and looked at his watch. Time to go, he said. He turned on the microphone on his vest. Time to depart, he said quietly. Whiskey Delta 7, give us a 15-minute head start, then depart. Roger that, Jim said in response. The plan was that Smith, Jorge, Ryan, Bill and Beverly would go in the van, and everyone else would take the helicopter. Smith got out as Ryan turned off the lights and locked the doors. Smith went to the van where Jorge, Bill, and Beverly were waiting, while Ryan went to the sheriff's car. Just so you know, Sheriff, we won't be using our main headlights, Ryan said. We'll keep the parking lights on until we get to the state line. How will you see? Asked Sheriff Coltrane, coming to a confused halt. Ryan held out a pair of night vision goggles. Holy shit, said the sheriff. You really know what you're doing, don't you? I like to think so, Ryan said. And remember what we talked about earlier. Besides, you promised that if I needed anything, I'd ask for it. I remember, said the sheriff. Walk us through the city if you can, Ryan said. I don't want people guessing what's going on. Good idea, the sheriff said. We can take the new bypass road. It's faster and will save you time. All right, Ryan said. Watch my co-worker's signal and we'll follow you. I want to stop at the station at the intersection with Highway 62 to get gas. He shook the sheriff's hand and climbed into the van, where he saw Beverly and Bill sitting in front of a large set of monitors and communications equipment built into a special rig. Beverly was wearing a Kevlar vest and her helmet was resting on the console in front of her. Are you ready, darling? He asked. She nodded her head nervously. Don't worry, you're going to make it. That's what I told her, Bill said. Let's go, Ryan called out. Jorge waved to the sheriff, who waved back and turned the car around. They pulled onto the highway, and as soon as they hit the road, Bill returned to the console, showing Beverly the new features of the system. Do you have a police scanner here? asked Ryan. Of course, Bill said. Turn it on, Ryan ordered. I want to make sure our sheriff doesn't make any unwanted calls. Got it, boss, Bill said, turning on the scanner. They heard nothing but the usual late-night chatter. The sheriff said he was going to patrol the bypass road all the way to the state line. 10-4, the dispatcher said. They listened, but Sheriff Coltrane stayed true to his word and said nothing about the van behind him. They sped into the night and stopped at a gas station near the intersection with Highway 62. Jorge jumped out of the car and filled the tank. If you need to use the restroom, this is your chance, Ryan said. I have to go. Really bad, Beverly said. Me too, Bill said. Okay, Ryan said. Just make it quick. A few minutes later, they were back and heading north into New Mexico. Jorge waved to Sheriff Coltrane as he crossed the state line. He fixed his night vision goggles and turned off his headlights. Ryan looked at Beverly and took her hand. She was trembling. He squeezed her hand and smiled. It's all right, dear, he said. Piece of cake. She nodded her head. Well, yeah, it's a piece of cake, she said. Maybe it's for you. I'm scared to death. That's okay. Take a deep breath, Ryan said, and then hold it in. She followed his instructions. Now exhale slowly. She obeyed, watching him. Do that a couple more times. You're getting good at it. Do you really do this for a living? She asked. Yes, it is, Ryan said. And so does Bill. How have you done it all these years? She asked. One day at a time, Ryan said. Isn't that right, Bill? He nodded his head. Yes, he said. Have you never been scared? She asked. All the time, Ryan said. Bill nodded his head. Then why did you do it? She asked. That's what we get paid to do, Ryan told her. Fear keeps us alert. Soon they pulled onto the road leading to the camp, and Jorge turned onto the road leading to the main gate. Stop here, Ryan said quietly. Jorge pulled off the road so the shrubbery hid the van. Ryan knew they were about 50 yards from the main gate. He pulled out 2 crossbows and handed one to Smith. Are you good at this? He asked. Smith nodded his head. Good. Let go. Ryan rummaged in his pocket and took out the 2 remote charges Cap had handed him earlier. Then he, Smith, and Jorge quietly climbed out of the van, trying not to make any noise so as not to alert the guards. Ryan handed the crossbow to Smith, and they crawled down the road until they were a few yards from the gate. There were 2 guards sitting at the gate, and Ryan could tell they were asleep in their chairs. He showed Smith to aim for the one on the right side of the road. They took careful aim and fired. The bolts flew out, and the bows made a twip sound. Both guards fell. Ryan and Smith handed the bows to Jorge. Take them to the van, then get back here as fast as you can, Ryan whispered. Jorge nodded his head and left with the 2 bows. They crept up to the gate and saw no one else. Ryan peered into the small guard shack and saw the many indicators on the console. No doubt, he thought, they were signal lights for the sensors in the shrubbery surrounding the camp. He pulled out a knife and cut all the cables he could see. When he noticed the large gnarled dogwood trees on either side of the narrow road, Ryan placed a charge at the base of each one and set the detonators as Cap had instructed. Making sure they weren't spotted, he slowly raised the gate so the van could drive inside when the time came. They looked around the compound and noticed 2 large black SUVs parked in front of one of the buildings. Ryan showed Smith. They weren't here yesterday, he whispered. Smith nodded and looked at the cars. Mexican plates, Smith whispered. From Chihuahua. Any idea who they might belong to? Not one, Ryan whispered. By then, Jorge had already returned. Ryan pointed to the building where Sarah and Ryan had been taken the day before. That's our target, he whispered. Here we come to the climax of this exciting chapter. Ryan and his team are ready for decisive action. The lives of his loved ones are at stake, and he is determined to save them at any cost. Like you, my dear viewers, I hope you are determined to make one click of your mouse on the subscribe button and let me know how much you like my content. Yes, I know, a good integration. The story turns into a real action movie. We are presented with the image of Ryan as a brave warrior, ready to do anything for his loved ones. Beverly, despite her fear, becomes his faithful comrade. Their love becomes even stronger in the trial by fire. What awaits our heroes on the way to salvation? Will they be able to overcome all the difficulties and defeat the villains? We will find out the answers to these questions in the next episodes, and in order not to miss them, be sure to subscribe.